I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight for this edition of our event Culture Creates Communities with the title of The Power of Art to Heal Trauma. So first I want to welcome and say thank you. You're all very much for sharing this evening with us. This event is intended to provide information and resources related to the use of art in the process of healing trauma. We from EastHUB understand the importance this topic holds, as well as how sensitive it is. For this reason, and for the well-being of everyone in this room, we ask you to feel free to participate in any way that makes you feel comfortable and able to enjoy this learning experience. Please feel free to either speak or stay in silence, to stay in the room, or to leave whenever you feel uncomfortable. There is no enjoyable and good learning experience where we can't concentrate due to hurtful memories. So I wish us all a very good time and that everyone leaves this room inspired by what will be shared here today. Thank you very much. So while we wait people to join the event, we're going to start with a short icebreaker. So for this icebreaker, I would like you to share what is something that gives you joy in time of stress. So just feel free to unmute yourself and speak, or just type in the chat, whatever you feel comfortable with.
Hi, my name is Leah. I am in California, and when I feel stress, actually, and I'm doing it right this minute, not because I'm stressed, but because I actually enjoy it, but I do like to go outside and garden, plant flowers, pull some weeds, water, mow, do any kind of yard work. I also like to read. I do work out, and I like to color and create whatever kind of art I can create.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you, everyone that is typing too. Thank you very much for sharing.
Yeah, I see there's a lot of playing with kids and pets. A hug. Mansi says a hug. I see a lot of art and nature-related comments in here, which I think all of these appeal to me a lot.
Awesome.
Hold on, Laura has something unique. Reorg. I think I do that when I'm like super stressed, and it doesn't give me joy, but it helps me relieve my stress for sure.
You change the focus.
Yeah.
That's great.
Oh,
okay.
Ashley says reading. Oh, Jesse, you too? Jesse likes to reorganize too.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you everyone for sharing. So now I will start with our like all events that the EastHUB make. We're going to start with land acknowledgement. So EastHUB acknowledges that we live and work on the unceded traditional land of the Coast Salish peoples. That includes, but is not limited to, Snoqualmie, Suquamish, Duwamish, Nisqually, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot tribes. We appreciate and honor the original residents of these lands and stand in solidarity with them against long-standing inequities and systemic oppression. We are committed to building enduring relationships and striving together to achieve just, equitable, and impactful change. We note that this kind of acknowledgement is not a new practice, but it is a traditional custom dating back centuries from many Native communities and nations. It is a powerful way of showing respect and honoring the indigenous people of the land on which we work and live. Acknowledgement is a simple way of resisting the erasure of indigenous histories and working towards honoring and inviting the truth. So now I would like to invite Ray Collum, EastHUB founder and CEO, to give a little introduction of the organization to you all. Welcome, Ray.
Thank you, Bernardo, and thanks everybody for coming along tonight. We just had our second birthday as an organization this month, so I find I don't have to introduce us as much as I used to, but very quickly, EastHUB is a community development organization working in the arts and culture sector. Our mission is to bring all parts of the Eastside communities together: government, corporations, philanthropists, arts and culture groups, and the folks who live here, to do something collectively that we don't have the power to do individually, which is to build and embed cultural gathering places in our community as this wave of development is happening, and to create the East Side, or to develop the East Side as a unique regional cultural destination, to give people a reason to come to the East Side to celebrate, to investigate the unique culture that is the East Side, which is different than Seattle, which is different than the rest of the region. We begin and we end with the community. We just had last week our very first time where we brought all arts and culture leaders together to give us feedback on how the building that we're building can better suit their needs, what kind of features and amenities and capacities they're looking to have inside of the building. And that is going to lead to, we think, a really wonderful building that people are going to love to come to and own. But the thing that actually excites us the most is not building buildings, it's doing things like this. Sudeshna and her team have led this, the formation of this incredible Culture Creates Community series. We go out, we talk to the community about the issues that are facing them, that they'd like to discuss in a group setting. We've had several incredible events so far, and I look forward to tonight being another one of them. So thank you, Sudeshna and your team. And Bernardo, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ray. Thank you so much. So today we're going to have actually three guest speakers. And the first one will speak for Tasveer. Tasveer is an organization that works to inspire social change through thought-provoking South Asian films, art, and storytelling. We look forward to hearing from Manasi Mishra. She is a marketing manager for Tasveer, and she's a social development professional who uses marketing and outreach for powerful storytelling. She works towards social change through community-centered practice, using an intersectional feminist, anti-racist lens. She has over 10 years of experience in marketing and program management for nonprofits, social entrepreneurship, and law. She recently graduated from Michigan State University with an MS in community sustainability. Our second speaker for Tasveer is Savita Krishnamurthy. She's an art historian, educator, organizer, and writer from India, based in Redmond, Washington. She earned an MA in art history from University of Bangalore, India, and an MA in cultural studies from University of Washington, and received the 2019 Merit Award from the Alpha Kappa Alpha Foundation. Krishnamurthy is a founding member and co-organizer for Black Cinema Collective, organizing screenings and moderated discussions on Africa and Afro-diasporic films. She completed her 6-year term as Vice Chair of the Redmond Arts and Culture Commission in March 2022. She has also taught courses on the arts tradition of India at Bellevue College. Her writing publications include The Time of India, Feminist Media Histories, University of California Press, Courageous Creativity, Black Embodiment Studio Journal, and the International Examiner, where she's a regular contributor writing on arts and culture. She performed in Tasveer yaoikipath in 2015 and shared her story again for San Diego-based nonprofit Ahana's yaoikipath 2016. Thank you very much for you two for coming here, and the floor is yours.
Do you want to share the video first? What's that?
Yes, please, if you can play the Tasveer video.
Okay, thank you. Jesse, it's not playing for me.
Sorry, give me 1 second.
Okay.
Is everyone able to see the video now?
Yes.
Is it pulled up? Okay.
Yeah.
It didn't like me sharing just the video for some reason.
Oh, okay. It's, yeah.
Thank you, Jess.
20 years ago still feels like it was yesterday because we are having so much fun and at the same time doing this amazing work of community building.
Rita and I had just met like the summer before September 11. We were became best friends right away.
We both were looking for a platform where we could bring films and create a dialogue. And since there wasn't a space like that already existing, we both said, why don't we create our own?
I mean, we can have art and we could have, those great films, but it could stop right there. It could just be, oh, that was a good film. But what I wanted was a development of critical thought and critical ideas, and that we actually grow. It becomes like an educational.
I learned a lot from Tasveer, watching movies, talking to people from different parts of the world. And one of the main things that happened was we were watching a movie, and it was about the war of 71 between India and Pakistan. The information about the genocide that happened in Bangladesh. My father was in the army and we never heard that. It was very difficult to hear.
It impacted my life because I also participated in yaoikipath 1 year, and I actually talked about the successes and challenges of being a new mother. And so it was really, like that whole creative process of being part of yaoikipath. And I was living and breathing Tasveer. I would not have even thought about, when I first started, oh, Tasveer on Netflix, Tasveer on, demand. And most recently with open mic, it would be amazing to have a Tasveer center, a place really where on a day-to-day basis people could come and connect.
Here we are 20 years later, and we know that we are still here. We're still making cultural shifts. We're still learning about one another. We're still providing space for arts and literature and cinema. So we're still here.
It's been 20 years since Tasveer has been here. So, we need to cultivate our youth. We need a place for them to come and feel that they are welcome and they are safe and they can say whatever they want to say and not felt judged. And we didn't have that stuff growing up. And every time I go away from Tasveer, whenever I come back, it's I'm embraced by the community, and and it's like coming home. It really is truly coming home for me.
Awesome. Thank you very much for the video. Now I invite Manasi to speak for Tasveer.
Thank you so much, Bernardo. I hope that the video gives a snapshot of Tasveer's work to everyone. And of course, I'm happy to answer questions later if you have any about our work. But as you can see, that empowerment through the arts forms the core of our work. And through all of our programs that engage community in different ways, directly with direct interactions with the community members, or giving platforms to South Asian artists, filmmakers, writers, showcasing their work, and then engaging in critical dialogue about their art with the community members, so as to bring a change in perspectives, with an ultimate aim to create social change. But also we really strive to create inclusive, safe, nurturing spaces where the community can come together, engage in forms of art, and share their stories, and feel healed and empowered in that process. And we hope to continue to be facilitators of such spaces. And so yaoikipath is actually one of our most powerful programs, and it's been running for many years. It's a South Asian adaptation of the Vagina Monologues. And each time a group of South Asian women come together in an inclusive safe space to share their powerful stories, and what is often the stories that when they're presented to the community, they often are very powerful monologues. They're captivating in their intensity. They're raw messages that often question societal norms, judgments, and prejudices. So it's a really powerful experience, not just for the participants, but for all the community members who gathered to listen to them and interact with them. And with that, I'd like to invite Savita. She's been a participant of yaoikipath to talk about her experience with the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mansi. And before I begin, thank you to EastHUB, Bernardo, Sudeshna, and also to Tasveer for inviting me to your event. I've attended the previous one, so I know the incredible work that you're doing with this kind of culture creates community programming. I'm here, well, I've been asked to talk about my yaoikipath journey and how, and just what transpired during that and also post that. And yeah, I'm going to share with you that and also how it has impacted my life in ways that I honestly never expected it to when I signed on to be a participant. So before I begin, talking about my own experience, I just, for those that are here and don't know what yaoikipath actually means, it is a South Asian adaptation of Eve Ensler's The Vagina Monologues, but the word itself, it's very nuanced. Yoni, the word yoni, the origin is from Sanskrit and it refers to the vagina, but in a deeper sense, it can also mean a sacred space. And it's symbolic of a womb where, creativity kind of originates or germinates. So, and bath is talk in Hindi and Urdu. So yaoikipath is, kind of talking about your journeys. I participated in 2015 at Tasveer's yaoikipath, and mine was a story of loss and grief. And it was really hard to, I think the hardest thing for me was to actually sign on to be a participant, because once I took the plunge there, then the whole process and the journey kind of, it holistically evolved, and it just grew from there, right? I think for me, what yaoikipath did was that it allowed me to have the sense of owning and reclaiming of a power, in a sense, to be able to stand in my own skin and just speak my truth, and for me to be seen and for me to be heard. And I think and a subset of that, it could have also allowed me to lend a voice to other people who perhaps shared similar stories, but they didn't, they had no point of reference to kind of vocalize it. So I think that's where the whole thing for me started. I also wanted to, give emphasis on the importance of the process of yaoikipath. So when you sign on to be a participant, there is an intense, 4.5 months of workshops that happen every, for us, it used to be every Sunday that we would meet at the Seattle Asian Art Museum. And I think the crux of the entire process is in those workshops, right? Because you are with your fellow participants and you become a cohort. You are a cohort and you bond with them, and you continue that, that relationship and that friendship beyond yaoikipath and beyond when your performance gets over. But I think the workshops were hugely influential and hugely impactful in allowing everyone who was there to think about their own stories in ways that perhaps we had never given it a thought. And that's what our directors and our guests who were invited to facilitate the workshops helped us to do. And so I think for me personally, that was the most important part, I would say, of the whole experience and the whole journey. And sure, you have the performance and you go and you perform in front of the audience when I did it in 2015, we had three, it was over a weekend. So we had, the opening was Friday night, and then we had Saturday night, and then we had a Sunday afternoon show. So we had 3 shows. So that is like the climax, right? The end of this whole process. So you end there, but then you finish your performance and you finish, and then there's also everyone who participates in yaoikipath says that there's a lot of this withdrawal that we all go through, because we are so used to meeting each other every Sunday for those 4 months, and then the Sunday after the show is over, you're like, what do we do this Sunday? We're going to be meeting our kind of group. So the workshops are really important. And what else? For me, I think the workshops also, and yaoikipath as a platform itself, it is also, like Mansi mentioned earlier, it's also a safe space, right? Because a lot of things that happen within in that confined space remains there, and only sections of it or parts of it come finally, to the public when we do our performances. But there's a lot of, back end stuff that we discuss, we talk about, we unpack, and which obviously it's meant to be within that a space for the participants, because it offers this space for very open, honest, and rather vulnerable conversations, and symbolizes like the safety for us to be able to talk about that in that space, and also the courage, because it's not always easy to come out and talk about some really, really hard things. And it takes a lot to, not just on stage, right? Even within your group, it takes a lot to actually open up, and building that trust over time to be able to talk to your fellow participants. And for me, I think my association with yaoikipath has continued in serendipitous ways, I guess, because in 2018, I went back to school. I went to the University of Washington to get my second master's in cultural studies. And when I was thinking about what a thesis is, or a capstone is a requisite in the graduate program in the second year, and I thought a lot about what I wanted to do with for my thesis, and then it just kind of holistically happened that I decided to have an academic lens of yaoikipath, wherein I situated my master's thesis on yaoikipath and how the performative space of storytelling and discourses of very personal narratives, often of trauma, become tools for community building and resistance, and also disruption, right, for social justice and social advocacy within the South Asian community here in Seattle. And so that was my focus and my my area of study. And when I looked at it from that perspective, it opened up so many things, because I also was looking at it from the point of view of a cultural studies scholar, and then how does yaoikipath fit into the the socio-cultural political context of the South Asian community here in Seattle. And yeah, so I'm continuing to work on refine my thesis. I guess it never ends when you write a dissertation. But hopefully the idea of doing my thesis on yaoikipath is also because there was one reading in my master's program which really impacted me deeply. It was a paper by this author called EastHUB, and the paper was on Suspending Damage, a letter to communities about the importance of ethics in research, right? Because so often, especially when you're doing community-based research, so often researchers go to the community and we take from the community because they are a part of our research. But then what are we giving back to that same community? We take it for academic purposes, but do we always give back to the community with what we have found or with what we have studied? And so my one of the things that that was significant in my own learning as I was researching was this ethical responsibility that I have as a researcher especially in this context, right? Especially with yaoikipath, because you're dealing with layers of trauma in the narratives. Not always, but there's a lot of trauma in many of the narratives, and how it became really important for me to think that my research should be mutually beneficial to the researcher, who was me, and to the researched, which is the community. And so I'm working on a project, and hopefully sometime soon it'll be out in the public. But the endeavor is to give back to the community, to Tasveer, what I studied. So I think that's been my experience with yaoikipath. And I don't know, are we opening it up for questions, Sadeshna?
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much, Savita, for sharing. Thank you, Manasi, to sharing a little more about Tasveer. And yes, now is the moment to open for Q&A. And so anyone that has questions for Manasi and Savita is welcome to jump in. Either talk or type into the chat. Just feel free.
I have a question, Savita, and Jesse, maybe you can stop sharing so we can see them. Savita, my question is, and I've performed in the same space as Savita, so I just wanted to ask the question of how does yaoikipath relate to the South Asian context of us? I'm South Asian, and I'm not always, or I was not always allowed to talk about my feelings or talk about specific issues, because my family never did that, but this was an approach with a lot of families. What would people say? How are you shameless enough to stand in front of people and talk about your story? So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for that. Absolutely. I think we all, you and I, we come from similar, backgrounds, growing up in India and coming here. And same thing. I think it's so much part of our the cultural coding that we have, that we just at least in South Asian. And also I should kind of rephrase it, or kind of emphasize that it is my like Sudeshna and my generation, right? Because I know that things have changed quite a lot in India. When I look at my nieces and my nephews in India, are way more open than I guess we were growing up there. But I think there's this, especially when it comes to sex and sexuality, there's such a big stigma, right, in our culture of, oh, you can't talk about it, or and especially it's very furtive, and as if it's something to be ashamed of. You talk in like whispers or among your friends, but you would never talk about it in front of your parents or relatives, or the adults in your life. And I think that is what and I know when Tasveer started yaoikipath years ago, I know there was so much of disruption, because there was a lot in our community in Seattle, in the South Asian community, who were not happy with these topics and these taboo topics being, presented out so openly in a mixed group. There were men, there were women, there was, and people from not just South Asians, there were people, others who also joined in the part of the audience. And I think that's precisely what Tasveer set out to do, right, with YKB, to disrupt that very conditioning and to disrupt that very notion of there's nothing to be ashamed of. And the more you have a space to facilitate these conversations, that is when healing happens, that is when growth happens, that is when unlearning happens, because we come with so many of our own biases and prejudices. And it's important, I always say this, it's important to keep learning, but it's as important to also unlearn so many of the biases that we have in our head and the conditioning that we have in our head. And when you're allowed to open your eyes and see things in a different way, or at least you're exposed to or have an awareness of it, then there's, tremendous change happens, and growth, which is so important, happens. So yeah, so I think that's one of the most important, I think, things that this platform, the YKB platform, does, right? And I think not just for the participants, I think it's also for the audience who comes to listen. It's very, very important for the audience who comes there. And it's not to, we're not here to, we're going like, you know, I'm not a teacher telling you I'm doing this and you have to learn this. No, the learning has, as an audience member comes, each one takes what they take from that show, right? From each show is different. But the idea is to push you a little out of your comfort zone and make you a little uncomfortable, because it's good to be uncomfortable and have that discomfort sometimes, because within that space of discomfort, there's tremendous opportunity for growth.
Thank you.
I have a question if there's time. Yeah. I've attended yaoikipath once, and I know what you're saying. The audience learns a lot. My question for you was, Savita, that if you could just expand a little more on how you felt after you performed at yaoikipath. What, you know, besides the relationships that you had, you know, getting up and speaking in front of an audience about your story. What did it do for you personally? How did you feel after that?
Thank you, Anona, for that question. I think for me, mine was a story of loss. So I lost my child who was 4 months, years back. And it took me a long time to process that whole thing. And I'm perhaps still processing it and healing and dealing with it in my own way. And I suppose that process will continue, you know, till the end of my days. But it was really hard, of course, to talk about my own topic and my own story. And you're right, it was not easy to kind of, to be up there on that stage, and you're really vulnerable, right? You're right there, you're bearing pretty much your soul to everyone over there. But I think it was almost cathartic in a way, because you feel like you've released something that you've been holding on for so long. And there's this, not, I wouldn't say like a burden, but there's just something heavy in your heart, right? Which kind of is always within you. But it's a sense of release when you're actually there and you talk about it. And a lot of healing comes from conversation and from talking to others. And also from audience members, because I had so many people come up to me and they shared similar stories of their own journeys of loss. And they were like, oh, it's really, it feels really empowering for us to know that we are not alone in our journey, that others have gone through this journey, and they may not, not any of them or all of them would come on stage and do their own yaoikipath, but just to hear a similar story like mine, and there was a connection, right? It connected to them. They just felt that, thank you. I mean, I've had a lot of people who came and say, thank you for, speaking up about this topic, because it's not easy to talk about loss and you kind of brush it under the carpet and you don't speak about it. But this kind of helped them. So that was very validating. I mean, it was unexpected. I didn't expect that I'll have so many people come and say that to me, but yeah, that was.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I think for me, it was more of the story not owning me, but me owning the narrative and me deciding who and to whom and where to tell my story. So I think that was a big leap for me in terms of how I negotiated with my own story.
I'd like to ask something.
Go ahead, Roseanne. Hi.
I'm Roseanne Royer. It seems that one, in engaging in this exercise, whatever one would call it, that something is learned about how to draw other people out. Did you, I've often thought that the people can work together, say in a business or organization for years and actually not really know anything about them that touches at all on the personal. And yet, sometimes I think if that could happen, there would be a better work environment. You'd have some more sensitivity. I just have spent quite a bit of time with a brother who's in the hospital right now who has really hidden a lot of his agonies and his regrets, things that, start happening more and more to people who are older. And I don't think there's ever been an opportunity before for someone to draw that out of him so that he felt comfortable he was doing it. And I don't know if I'm getting off the track here, but would you say that in addition to being able to, you know, reveal things about yourself, that in fact would you find yourself drawing other people out, that you can go then from there to a workplace or back to your family and maybe realize, I mean, do you think you have some tools so that you can draw it out of not just a special group that gets together, but people who are around you every day?
Oh, is that a question for me?
For anyone.
I think what I mean, I can only speak from my own experience, from my own experience, I think when you say take it beyond that space of yaoikipath and go out, you know, into your own life and your own lived experiences, I think for me, it made me a better listener. And it also made me more empathetic because no one has walked in your shoes. So they don't know your story and you have not walked in another person's shoes. So like, don't be so quick to judge another person because you don't know what their story is, right? And what's going on with them. And definitely to be more empathetic to, you know, to those around you. And perhaps I've been a better wife and a mother after yaoikipath, a little more compassionate and a little more gentle with, you know, so I think that's been my my experience, which I can apply to my everyday life, right? So it's a lived thing that I can practice every day.
Right. Yeah. So in other words, if you bare your soul, then maybe even subconsciously you're sort of creating some fertile ground for someone else to be comfortable to, or you just go for it and ask them.
Or also not just me bearing my soul, but also being allowed the privilege to hear others bear their soul to me. That is also like, it's a huge honor to have someone trust you enough that they can share their deepest, you know, thoughts with you. So I think it's a two-way street.
Yeah, and just adding to that, just the, you know, significance of a safe space, because I think that's kind of essential for the healing to happen, and then for us to reach a point where we are ready to be vulnerable in other spaces.
Thank you. There's no more questions.
I've got a question.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So I'm wondering a little bit about the safe space, and I understand about working together over that 4 months. But then how do you guarantee a safe space when you perform it? I mean, I'll leave it at that. And I'm going to wander off track a little bit like Roseanne maybe, but I was just thinking about using this model for, I'm thinking, for example, about families with transgender kids in Texas. And, you know, they could find a safe space within their own communities with their own shared experience. But then, and hearing those stories, when you actually hear the human stories, you know, it does make you more compassionate, but it guaranteeing or doing something to try to provide that safe space to perform it. So can you run with that and try to answer whatever my question is?
I'll start, but Sudeshna, you can add with your own experience also. I think safe space within the workshops, it's a really safe space because, like I said, it's only 10% of what we actually, you know, kind of compute within the workshops makes it on stage, because there's a lot that just doesn't go into the public, because that is meant for us, for that cohort of that particular group. In terms of, you're right, when you are out on the on a public forum and on a platform like yaoikipath and you're sharing your story, sure, it's out in the open, but even before every show begins, Tasveer is really conscious about stating why they do yaoikipath, what is the reason for doing it, and also the responsibility of the audience who's listening to our stories, and how it is a responsibility for them in how they should receive the stories that they're listening to. And if they do not agree or they do not like anything, they're perfectly welcome to leave the space, right? And for a lot of them, it's very triggering. It's not just that they don't like the story or they don't agree with the story. A lot of the stories are triggering for them because of something that they have faced themselves. And so there's actually there's mental health professionals in every performance of yaoikipath to help the audience member who is having a hard time processing some of the stories that they listen to. So the audience space also becomes a safe space. So and also when you have the Q&A, you are also requested as an audience member not to ask some really personal or very hurtful questions to the participants, because that is not the reason why we have come here to do this, to do the show, right? So I think in that sense, you can create a safe space within a public forum as well. That's what I mean. That's what I experienced. Sudeshna?
Yeah, I think to add on to that, I think it's important to create an intent for that space so people know what that space is for. So like what Savita was saying, when we do yaoikipath, we know that this is what I'm going to, not this particular thing, but I'm going to see stories about trauma. I'm going to see people being really vulnerable. I'm here to support them. I don't personally think any space is 100% safe space, but I think when you go to a performance or when you go to a group like that, it could be a small meeting, it could be an audience of 500 people. Very likely there are more people who are on your side than not. And you will find so much love, support, and understanding of what you have faced that it will outshine anything else that like a non-safe space person might have commented or might have talked about. So I think it's just growing that network of safe people to be around, feeling that safety. I think it outweighs a few people who might be outspoken or who do not understand the context of the meeting. But I think setting the intent and of course having the resources that are available to help you with any of these things is important when you're doing any kind of a meeting.
Can I ask a question to follow? So does the audience usually have an opportunity to respond and ask questions, or is it usually performers or people who are speaking and an audience who are there to listen and learn? Or is there time to get the audience involved?
Yes, there's always a question and answer, a Q&A after every performance, and the audience is allowed to ask questions.
So the audience is made up of just anyone who hears about it and wants to be there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and these are not recorded. So anybody who comes there and watches it, they're encouraged not to share or spread the word or say things about the stories that they've heard, but to just kind of internalize them or talk to a friend who has come to the event with you. So these events are not recorded, and just trying to keep that safe space or conserve that space is the intent also. Okay, we're running out of time, so I'm just going to ask Bernardo to move on to the next section.
So first, I'd like to thank you very much, Mansi and Savita, for your presentations and contributions today. I also like to thank Sudeshna, Nona, Roseanne, and Barbara for your questions and participation as well. So before moving on to our next guest speaker, we're going to have a short poll. Sudeshna, do you want me to do it? Or? Okay. So please take like a minute to answer if you want these questions.
And these questions are from our next guest speaker, Amy, who's going to talk about her film, Visceral. So if you see that question number 2 and question number 3, that's what it's about.
Okay.
There isn't anything on the screen right now.
Oh. Are folks seeing the screen?
I just submitted.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I submitted the poll and then now it's showing a blank poll time and that's it. No poll.
But this is after you submitted, right?
After I
Yeah.
submitted.
Okay. Okay, got it. Okay, I'm going to end this in 10 seconds. So if you haven't submitted your poll, now is your chance. Oops. Sorry, I'm just trying to take screenshots. I can't seem to be doing that. It's more than 10 seconds, sorry.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
We have a winner, yes.
Yeah, so I'm just going to end the poll. So the first question, have you ever done art therapy with a therapist? Most people, 62% have said no, but I would like to. So that's something to think about. Did you watch Visceral? 91% said no, but most of them said that they're planning to watch it.
Yep. So please, whenever you are able to, just watch the documentary. It's really, really great material. Yes. So now I would like to introduce you to our next guest speaker, Amy Erickson. Amy Erickson is a filmmaker and social impact communicator. She infuses her work with years of research on resilience, interpersonal neurobiology, intentional change, and emotional intelligence. She holds a Master's in Nonprofit Leadership from Seattle and a Bachelor of Arts in Consumer Economics from Wayne State University. She also is trained as a trauma responder through First Aid Arts. She's an emotional intelligence coach and has a certificate of study in appreciative inquiry from Case Western Reserve, Weatherhead School of Management. Amy's connection to the subjects, organizations, and audiences for this film stem from her years as a consultant working with social service organizations that serve families and children. She has deep experience in the field, adverse childhood experiences, trauma-informed arts, and resilience. In 2011, she created the first ACEs and Resilience website, Resilience Trumps ACEs. Amy's first video project was for the Walla Walla Leaders Network, which she created and launched in 2012. Amy is the director of Visceral, and she will speak Visceral Transforming Trauma Through Theater, and she will present the documentary and talk a little bit about the subjects around it for us today. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you, Bernardo. It's nice to be here. I appreciate the invitation. And I've really enjoyed the presentation before mine. It was fascinating. It brought up a lot of thoughts for me. And the first thing I want to do is talk a little bit about the difference between art therapy and therapeutic art making, just so I can frame what I'm going to talk about. And art therapy is actually something you do with a licensed provider who incorporates dance, movement, music, drama, enactments, theater, creative writing, play. And these are ways you process through a container of sorts the trauma or the anxiety that you're trying to recover from. And using these forms of expressive arts helps process and integrate our brain by engaging our survival brain through the senses while simultaneously engaging our feeling and thinking brain. And this helps us make meaning of our sensory information that our nervous system is holding on to. And so these therapies are important to highlight because the sensory activity is what is key. And a therapist helps you unlock that traumatic energy that people hold in the form of tension in their bodies when they haven't processed trauma. So the overall objective is to integrate our mind and body sensations from the bottom up. That's the key. And what's different and what I'm going to talk about is how I pursue this was through therapeutic art making, which is available to all of us. We can do all kinds of different art activities. For me, it was performing on stage, singing, dancing, and acting. And that was where my breakthrough from post-traumatic stress started and what led me to make the documentary Visceral, Transforming Trauma Through Theater. So Visceral tells the story of 4 individuals, each of them who has complex trauma. 3 of them are veterans. And basically, it's my story that is told through their lives. And for all of us, we reached a point in our lives where we were stuck. Medication and therapy wasn't working. And none of us are professional actors, but we were all really struggling with depression and ill health and suicidal thoughts. And the key thing was damaged relationships. For all of us, we'd suffered trauma in relationships, and that was where the healing had to happen. And so each of us tried getting on stage and performing, and all of a sudden we began to feel the vitality that we had lost because we were shut down or dealing with rage and incapable of managing our lives on a daily basis. And each of us move forward in our lives in very unique ways, which are told through the stories in the film. And we all integrate therapy into our lives and process and continue to process what comes up for us on a daily basis. And those can be working with, talk therapists or somatic therapists, which is what I like to do. But my story really was all about experiencing childhood trauma through abuse and neglect. And I grew up with feeling a constant sense of prolonged threat because I never had learned to regulate my own nervous system and my emotions. And I was dysregulated, cycling between rage and depression. And the reason is because our nervous systems are like TSA agents. We're always scanning, our system is always scanning the environment for threat. And when you live like that for a long time, like I did, you grow up with developing a lot of chronic health issues. And, prolonged stress, post-traumatic stress really does affect your nervous system. So by age 40, I had all kinds of health issues, endometriosis, infertility, fibromyalgia, the list kind of goes on. And it wasn't until I was almost 50 years old when I went to see a doctor and, I just was at the end of my rope and talk therapy wasn't really working for me anymore. And she said, you just need to think about finding your joy. And the only thing I could remember at that time was one time I had been on stage and I just felt alive. And I really didn't have any training as an actress, but I wanted to get back on stage and see if that would happen again. And it did. And I was so, full of joy because of that I began to explore how it worked in other people's lives. Could this happen with other people? And that's when I also began working with the Adverse Childhood Experiences movement in Eastern Washington and learned a lot about what those are, the 10 adverse childhood experiences and how I had experienced them in my life. And I decided to make Visceral because I wanted to share this experience I had with other people. So right now we're going to see a series of excerpts and the trailer from the entire film. So you get a little bit of an idea of what's in the film. So Jesse, let her rip.
Things are holding me back, physically holding me back. I am not getting out of bed. These things are holding me back, physically holding me back.
I feel as though there's something broken inside of me. I'm just not who I could be.
How do you live through your daughter being beaten to death?
Being hit, being abused was normal.
Well, why don't you feel like you had a voice? And I said, because I was raped by my recruiter.
Nobody sees my anger. I just bottle it up.
So the visceral trauma is replayed in terms of sensations of heartbreak, becoming uptight, becoming agitated, becoming scared, having sensations in your body that warn you, having your heart beat faster. Trauma is that your organism gets stuck there. You are a helpless person who is being raped. You are a soldier who is destroyed by the death of his friend and your subsequent atrocities that you committed. It's getting stuck in a state in your body.
Stories live in our bodies, and our bodies are where the truth is told.
The role of theater, back to the time of the ancient Greeks, has been to help people speak about the otherwise unspeakable.
Oh, if I could, what grief should I forget? If I were mad, I'd forget my son.
Finally, after 14, 15 years of not being able to grieve at all, I had the first step towards grieving for my daughter. And that was because of this Shakespeare group, but because of the ability to have these emotions start to come up that have been buried so deep, I didn't even know were still there.
That embodiment of what we're asking them to do by standing up, by using their body, by using their voice, it really gets at the release of the traumatic energy in a better way than just sitting and talking.
What's the sign of transformation? It's that aha moment. Ah, there's my truth.
It really can be life-changing.
Window of tolerance, that's a term coined by Dr. Dan Siegel, helps to normalize how we are on a daily basis. When we think about the window of tolerance, this is our resilient zone or our optimal zone of arousal. Kind of as we're going through life, like I like to think of it as a flow, that on a daily basis, as we activate the sympathetic nervous system, just like when we're taking a breath in, we're accelerating a little bit, and then when we breathe out, we're activating our parasympathetic nervous system and kind of calming down. So that's our daily state when we're in flow, when we're in balance. Our natural flow, right? So when we're in balance in our optimal zone of arousal, in our resilient zone, we're able to engage with others, we're kind of able to learn, we're able to receive information from whatever is happening around us, to respond appropriately, to engage with our social connections and to be able to check in with those around us. We're able to regulate, whether we're able to speed up or to slow down. And so we're kind of flowing in our window of tolerance. But when something happens that pushes us out a little bit, either up where we start to become like a little bit activated, where we start to feel a little more anxious and we start to feel some of the effects in our body. So whether it's our heart racing or like adrenaline flooding through, we're less able to engage with those around us. We're less able to receive stimulus and respond appropriately. And really it's our body's just best response to kind of the stimulus of, being in fight or flight or freeze, and that it's our body's just best response to try to take care of us. And so really normalizing that response and saying, that's our body just trying to take care of us. It's really not about removing the stress, but really how to tolerate it. And the more that we're able to practice regulation techniques or things that we can do to really bring ourselves back into balance, the more we're able to tolerate that distress and really expand and widen our window of tolerance. If our window of tolerance is wide, and we've been able to learn or know how to kind of regulate our system, we're able to come back down, right, into our window of tolerance. But sometimes we can get stuck there, right, up in hyper or hypoarousal if we kind of sink down into kind of a freeze state. If we are stuck in hyper or hypoarousal for too long, then our window of tolerance actually starts to shrink. And then what happens is over time, we start to kind of really cycle in between hyper and hypoarousal. How does theater help us to regulate, to come to flow, to kind of expand our window of tolerance? Well, we need to start with the body, right? We need to start with the body to calm our body down before we can connect, engage with our social engagement system, and then we can bring our thinking brain back online. Breath really helps to activate the parasympathetic nervous system to bring you back into your body and to ground and to bring you back into flow. So breath is a huge piece. It's the first thing that we do, and then bringing kind of the grounding into the body, right? So breath and body. But those same grounding, calming activities that we can do in our body right before we step onto stage and really help us to ground into ourselves, into our bodies, helps us to be more present, right, with ourselves and with the audience and with the other people on stage who are with us.
What else do we have in Shakespearean verse? We have a rhythmic structure. That structure, that iambic pentameter, is a beat.
right? And it's that ba-bum, 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 which is also like the heartbeat. So we're saying the heartbeat, right? So we're speaking in a rhythm that's already going on in our body. We're matching up, we're creating a kind of synchrony with the rhythm of our body and our thought and voice. But also, the pentameter, the 5-meter line, the pentameter, is, on average, a resting single inhalation-exhalation cycle is 5 heartbeats. So we're also engaging the breath rhythm. It's almost as if this somatic highway that goes on through the heart, through matching the heartbeat and the breath rhythm, hitches a ride on the sort of secret train that gets through under the defense system or under the monitor and editor system of the cognitive part of us. And in it, hitching a ride on the back of that is the content of the text. So the text has this superhighway right into our gut, right into our heart, right into our feeling self, right? So when you say, oh my gosh, I'm just suddenly in this groove of relating to him as a vet, is because it's bypassed your rational part that goes, I don't even know the guy. Why are you feeling like you're so connected? You're not connected. I just met him this morning. What is this? This is weird to think that I have feelings for him, right? That's what our cognitive brain wants to do. It wants to rationalize it, organize it. It wants to pretend that it's in control when it's not. The body is in control and the cognitive sense is along for the ride. So that hitchhike in there on the rhythm of the body, taking the content in there, and it does two things. It not only, as we have been talking about and looking at it through the work, gives you a container to pour this feeling into, right? I've got someplace to go. If I've just got words of, I don't know, no, I'm fine. You know, all this cover language of modern text, and we're going to try to make you angry. By the time you go, I don't know! You know, it's like, bam, we're blowing the play out of the water. It makes no sense, right? But when we can get in there and say, I am a soldier! You know, it holds that. So it's a container to hold it, but guess what else it does because of that hitchhiking? It has this ability to go into you and hook onto the place where the feeling is and bring it out of you, right? So that you get some of this responsiveness out of that text in spite of any intentions. It does it for you.
The beauty of theater, or the boundaries of the theater, enables that nervous system to feel safe enough to, in a sense, reemerge. In theater or in acting, you are creating physiological states that mimic normal, spontaneous states of feeling safe. We can see in dance and in acting and in vocal groups, we see co-regulation through those behaviors because they're using the face, the muscles of the face, they're using voice, they're using breath, and these are systems that are calming systems. If we have good experiences co-regulating, it provides us with the resource to self-regulate. This is occurring literally on a therapeutic level with people who could not feel safe or could not feel safe beforehand. What they're doing is providing experiences for that nervous system of social engagement without threat, which is really part of the vulnerability of people who are survivors of trauma.
Theater is a really powerful tool to really reestablish a sense of safety. And I think part of it that I've recognized is like, you know, when you're engaged in like theater exercises in terms of warming up the body, it really does focus on reconnecting to a sense of self. Safety is a huge piece that's compromised, you know, when people experience traumatic stress in the body, and safety in terms of psychosocial support, in terms of trauma care, in terms of integration has been named as one of the key things that we need to reestablish in our sense, in our body, in our sense of space and in relationship with others. Integration is woven throughout the theatrical journey, or just like the experience of doing theater. Assuming character, assuming emotions even that maybe we've disconnected from or aren't able to inhabit in our daily lives. We try them on and we're like, oh, okay, you know, this is what it feels like and I can get through this, you know, and this is how I can externalize it. So I think that is a piece that is really powerful for me around integrating parts of selves, which is a huge piece of trauma work. Theater is so much about embodied practice. Like we talked about grounding and breath and really being able to come back into our presence of sense of connection with ourselves as well as with each other really helps us to integrate, right, from the bottom up. And so we're integrating from the bottom up as well as our right and left brain. And so we're kind of integrating it all.
So let's move on to this first slide, Jesse, the create slide. Okay. When people okay, so I created this framework when I started putting Visceral together as a way to help illustrate the themes that I was seeing as I interviewed all the different experts and the individuals in the film. And the top one is really about connection versus isolation, because so often when people who have post-traumatic stress, it always is that we feel it's very difficult to stay connected to others, and we tend to want to isolate if we're not in that window of tolerance section that I'm going to talk about in a minute, because our nervous system feels threatened. And for some of us, that happens quite a bit. So we cut off our emotions so that we don't have to feel anything. But on stage, what we find is when we're connected to others and we do feel safer in this contained environment, we can begin to transform our own emotional states. And that is also, that connection piece happens when you're doing art on your own. If you're creating a work of art, if you're writing, if you're dancing or singing, you don't have to be with another person, but what you're going to find is that you are feeling grounded, present, and the breath is there. And that's the key thing, is you start to feel like you can regulate. And that's the next piece of this outline. The idea of regulation is so important that it is, I think, the key to transforming trauma for all of us, or anxiety, that when we're able to begin to self-regulate and process what's coming up in our body, it's when that moment is when we can start to feel like we can co-regulate with another human being. And that means feeling safe enough in the presence of another human being to express ourselves. And for most of us, for me, example, the difficulty I had, the trauma I experienced in relationship made me afraid to want to be in connection with others until I could learn to process my own trauma. Then I could begin to co-regulate with other people, but that was happening on stage in a very natural way. And I think it's like, for me, it's the most healing aspect of performing. And that the other piece of that is the reciprocity. And what's happening is each of us as a human being has what's called a social engagement system. And that is where through our eyes, through our voice, and through our ears, we have learned to feel safe in the presence of another human. And that's how we have evolved as human beings. When we are able to talk and share and feel calm in the presence of another, that happens on stage as well. And that happened for me. And I think it's really key that we also talk a little bit about, the vagus nerve, which is the nerve that attaches from our brainstem and goes down to our gut and then comes back up again. And that's where the sensations come. And I mentioned from the bottom up earlier. So while we're performing on stage, we have a lot of our sensations that come up from our body. And those help us to feel and be able to be in the role or sing the music or move the way we are supposed to move on stage. And a little fact is that our gut has more nerve endings than any other place in our body and sends more signals to our brain than the other way around. And that's why the breath is so important. So let's see, we'll keep moving on here. The next thing that happens, and for all of us, I think when we're on stage, is we begin to learn to manage the triggers that we have and the feelings that are coming up, because we are in that container of the performance. If not, if we couldn't do that, we would be hijacked all the time by our emotional, being of, the fear of being on stage. So that was a very healing aspect of performing for me. And for everybody that I've interviewed for the documentary, which many of them are not in the film, but we all talked about through performance, we felt like we had given voice to our embodied emotions, that we began to cope in a collective way. And, this is what Bessel van der Kolk, who's the author of The Body Keeps the Score, says. We're using the breath, the whole body, and we're resonating with others. We're deeply experiencing our common humanity. And this requires us kind of pushing through the blockages to unveil our own truth so it can emerge on stage. And then we go on after that and we learn how to process our emotions in therapy if we want to go on. The next one is transformation. So that means, taking what we've learned and moving on from there, and integrating this in a way and making meaning about what comes up for us as performers, either on stage or off. And then the last is embracing our lives. And so for me, I wanted to do more. I wanted to continue acting because of the vitality I felt in my life. And each of the people in the documentary also goes on, and their lives really just blossom. And they go from being very stuck like I was to really pursuing some things that they wanted to pursue. And so it's very exciting to watch. And we all embrace our lives. So Jesse, if you could go on to the next slide, I'm going to touch on the window of tolerance that Ruth talked about. And so the window of tolerance is really how she explained it. I'm just going to enlarge my screen here. I'm in a different setting. Hang on a second here. If you look at the response zones when you have been feeling like stressed out, if you had an average day, you may actually find yourself in a hypoarousal state where you are stressed out and you're feeling really unpleasant and you can't think, you can't communicate, you have racing thoughts. That is very, challenging to be living in that state, as is being in the freeze state, which is where your stress has actually sent your body into a state of being almost shut down and you have low energy and you feel unpleasant. And I guess the best way for me to talk about this right now is, my mother just passed away a few weeks ago, and I've been sort of in a freeze state and trying to figure out a way with using art to move forward in my life so that I can rebalance myself and find that place in the window of tolerance that I'm going to have energy and also be able to, process what happened in her death and my life with her. But I'm not there yet. So I'm aware that that's a place that I want to be and I want to get to. And there's ways I can do that. And for example, I'm looking at talking to a somatic therapist about, what is going on in my body? What am I not able to process right now because I'm sort of in the high stress level if I get to that point where I'm anxious about not being able to process it. So that's just an example for me. And I'd like to hear if anyone else has ever heard of the window of tolerance. This was created by Dr. Daniel Siegel, who's, he created everything around mindfulness, if you ever have been interested in learning about mindfulness. So if we can go to the next slide, we're going to just touch on, let's see. Oh, I have control of the slides. Sorry, Jesse. Just take a look right now and ask yourself tonight where you are on the scale. And just take a second, and maybe you can, when we get into the question and answer, you know, you can tell me, or you can share your thoughts on that. Okay, are we ready to, has everyone read that? Okay. So there's a few activities that I've added here, and I'm gonna just do one real quick because I think this is kind of a neat way. It's an art activity that you can actually do right now. You can put on some music. Okay, I think we have about 5 minutes, so I'm just gonna do this. And we're going to do the last one, doodling in the air using both hands like a conductor. If you're feeling a little bit restless or stressed, the key is to bring your whole body into the process. So if you want to put on a song and move your hands like you're conducting and draw the pictures of what you're hearing. So I was playing Katy Perry's Firework tonight, and I was thinking about, do you ever feel like just singing along, and I was up moving around, and that really moved me from kind of feeling a little bit low today. Another activity is the next one I have here, noticing your environment. So if you're feeling a little bit disconnected from your body, which happens to us all the time because we tend to be up here in our mind, in our prefrontal cortex, always thinking about what has to be done, and we may not be able to access the sensations in our body. This is a really good thing to do. Just stop in the middle of the day and walk around and answer these questions out loud to yourself. You know, what are 5 things you see? And you describe those 5 things. What are 4 things you feel right now in the moment? If you're walking around the yard, the feeling of the grass on your shoe or your foot, you get the idea. What are 3 things you hear? If you're in the yard, the birds, you know, in my yard, the ocean. So anyway, you get the idea. But these are all things that you can do to bring yourself back into your body. And really, that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Amy. Thank you. Thanks so much for the short video you made about the documentary. So I think it gives a nice incentive for people to watch the whole film for sure. Yeah, I really enjoyed watching the movie for sure. Thank you very much. So now we're gonna open for Q&A. So anyone that has questions for Amy, feel welcome to type or speak as you want.
And I also wanted to do a plug. Amy has agreed to give us a discounted price for the movie, for the documentary. So it's in the chat. If anybody wants to copy that, I'll also send it in a thank you email in a few days. Roseanne?
I am, this reminds me of role playing, which, you know, as a former teacher, you know, use that technique a lot, but much deeper. And I just see many people, including myself, sometimes during the day, you know, wondering where is the, you know, what's the best way to let out steam, etc. But I'm wondering about bring people into this kind of theater activity. There surely are people that could never be convinced that they could engage in the activity. How does that work, Amy? I mean, it's better to save some who want to be saved than to not be doing any work, but what is the way to draw someone in who may never have been on a stage, is bashful about it? Do you do that? How do you do that?
Well, there is a field of drama therapy that takes the same approach that an art therapist does, where you are in a contained, safe space. You're actually processing what comes up, which is the difference between what I do, which is theater for therapeutic purposes, because I love to do theater. But there are a lot of groups that actually, I don't know in the Seattle area exactly off the top of my head what they are, what the names are, but First Aid Arts is the first one that comes to mind. And they use different forms of art, but drama therapy is a really good way to start. And you don't have to be an actor. And like I think I mentioned, none of the people in this film are professional actors, but they just found the courage to stay in the moment on a stage, and it transformed their lives. Mm-hmm.
So there must be some kind of discussion that goes on ahead of time, or do they know they intentionally are getting involved in a drama therapy class?
Right. So a drama therapist would actually be a licensed provider. It's not a class. You'd actually be going to a group or a therapist who specifically works in that realm.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
There's a question in the chat. Is there a drama therapy program for kids who are highly stressed?
You know, that's something I would have to look into. I don't have that resource at my fingertips. I know there are nationally, because when I started making the documentary, I was living on the East Coast and I was working with a drama therapy organization in New York. Just that I moved from, like Antioch University here in Seattle would be a great resource we could look into. They could tell us if there are groups that do that. So that's something I can look for and add to our resource list. Somebody asked a question here. Should anyone with trauma look into volunteering at local theater, or should they have professional therapy while doing it? I do think that you should talk to a therapist. I recommend a somatic therapist, which is a therapist that's going to work with your body and bring your body along, so that it's not just talk therapy. Because if you are going to go into a theatrical role, you will have things come up. And I think it's important to be working in both realms. So I say, yes, volunteer to theater, but also have a therapist.
Amy, I know an art therapist in South King County, which is my turf, who feels a little lonely, you know, and I'm just wondering if is there a good resource list regionally for different types of this kind of art therapy, and whether it's drama therapy or visual art therapy, which is what she does, or music therapy. I just wonder if there's just a centralized place for those kind of resources.
Yes, and I don't have, I'm sorry, I don't have that resource to share in the chat, but I will provide that to Bernardo, and we can have that available. When you say that the art therapist is lonely, what did you mean by that?
Just meaning she feels like there aren't that many other folks who are doing that work in our neck of the woods, you know, and so she's not able to really build a network with fellow professionals in that regard. And I'm trying to assist with that a little bit, but I'm sure somebody's already invented that network.
Right. Oh, there is. There's the International Expressive Arts Therapy Association. There's the National Organization for Arts and Health. There are many at the national level, and those are the groups that I'm most familiar with. That's why I don't have at the top of my head like where they are in Seattle. I do know that if you do a search for psychologists and you specify art therapy, you will get a list of them. If like Psychology Today, for example, That's how or somatic therapist and art therapy as another search term.
Okay, thank you very much, Amy. Thank you very much for the presentations. Thank you, Roseanne and Barbara, for the questions and your contribution as well. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming here today, and I wish everyone had a great learning experience and got inspired by our guest speakers' presentations and projects. And I would like to invite you all to engage with us in future events, connecting with us by through our website and social media. We're going to be sharing these informations and in the follow-up email for sure, together with Tasveer and Amy's social media as well, so you can keep in touch with them if you have more questions in the future, and you can stay in touch about the projects they're going to work with. So EastHUB is on Facebook and Instagram. Tasveer social media, and Amy, like I said, will be in the follow-up email. And I'll say, please register for the next Culture Creates Communities events. The title is Artists with Disabilities, A Perspective on Accessibility, Opportunities, and Celebrating Talent. It will be on April 21st. And Sadeshna, you're going to share the link in the chat right here.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, and lastly, these events would not have been possible without our wonderful sponsors. Thank you, Facebook, for support of Culture Create Communities event series, Amazon for their ongoing support for arts and culture on the East Side, and Microsoft, who made it possible for us to do all this work with their foundational support. I wish you all a great rest of your night, and I hope to see you soon in our next Culture Creates Communities. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our pleasure. Thank you so much, Amy. Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Thanks all for joining.